Hi, folks. So if there's one question, if there's one proof on this in this practice set that was a little bit of a trick question, it would have been this one, because if you'll see by the time we get through it that premise 2 is an extra premise. We can derive the conclusion without using premise 2. Now, bear in mind, this does not make the argument wrong or invalid. In fact, because the conclusion is derivable from premises 1, 3, 4, and 5, no addition of any premises would then make it invalid. Validity doesn't work that way, and it's you can kind of think through sort of template-y truth tables to confirm what I'm saying here. But line 2 ends up being a little bit of a red herring, and in that sense, it's kind of a trick question, a distractor, I guess you could call it. Why do I have you look at a proof like this? Partly to just be aware of it. But the fact of the matter is that you don't have to use all the premises for a proof to be correct. You can use premises more than once. You won't write them more than once. You'll just refer to them more than once, right? You can use any line in a proof, for that matter, more than once. Importantly, if you derive extra lines that end up being dead ends, that's also not wrong. As long as that line was entered according to one of our rules, that line is correct, even if you don't actually use it to get to the conclusion, kind of like an extra premise. Like, the lines, as long as they're legal, they're fine to be in there. It's maybe not the most efficient way to get the conclusion, but it really, no one cares at this point anyway, how efficient you're getting to the conclusion. Oh, you can derive the same sentence more than once, possibly using different rules or using the same rules, and those extra lines are not wrong. I think those are kind of the main quirks. The fixed points, though, are you're starting with the premises and you're ending with the conclusion, and each line in between must be justified correctly using one of the rules of our system. All right, so how do we go about actually completing this proof? Well, I'm gonna demonstrate the working forwards strategy. That's the strategy where you're looking at your premises and you're seeing what you can get from them, and you're guiding that towards the conclusion. And for all of the strategies, for all proofs, the first thing you do want to do is just take some stock. Make sure that you have identified main operators. That tells you that, for example, lines 1 and 3 are candidates for DS, provided that we can find the negation of one or the other sides. And oh, look, in fact, when we look for the negation of one or the other sides, we find that, we already have the ingredients for DS on lines 1 and 4. Is that going to be helpful? Is that going to be useful? Wait just for a second while we're still taking stock. The horseshoe in line 5 says we've maybe got a candidate for MP or MT or HS. It just depends on what else the proof gives us. Other things worth noting: cannot use modus tollens on an embedded horseshoe. Okay, but if we could somehow get this disjunct, then we'd have the ingredients for modus tollens. And also, line 5 was a candidate for modus ponens, modus tollens, or hypothetical syllogism. If we were going to use modus ponens, then we would want to have B on a line by itself. And that's one of the disjuncts on line 3. We don't currently have a way to derive B. But again, in terms of things to kind of keep an eye out for, is just that possibility. And of course, if we could derive B somehow to use modus ponens, then we'd be deriving the consequent, which is our desired conclusion, and then we'd be done with the proof. Okay. The amount of information you get when you're taking stock does kind of depend. It depends both on you and how much proof vision you have, and also how much the premises are going to give you. Sometimes you need intermediate lines before you make much progress, but we're going to work forward. So we're just going to take what our premises are giving us and generate a new line or two and see if we aren't starting to see a way to make progress towards the conclusion. And so that means starting with, on lines 1 and 4 as our ingredients, we're going to use the rule DS. That means that we're deriving a hook S, a horseshoe S. Okay. What now? Well, take stock. Now we've got a new sentence, we've got a new potential ingredient, and notice we had sort of keyed in on this move before, right? If we were able to derive a horseshoe S, then we'd be able to use modus tollens on line 4 and the line that contains a horseshoe S, which is line 6, modus tollens. Clean that up a little bit. And what that gives us is tilde A. And so what happens now? Well, my notes anyway don't show the way, right? There's nothing, kind of the way is shown, but I don't actually have a comment saying, oh boy, let's look for tilde A. So pretend maybe you're stuck. What happens whenever you're stuck is take stock again, look at all of your premises and look through to your new lines as well, and look for repeated sentence letters, matching sentence letters. Does A show up somewhere else? Well, of course it shows up in line 6, but that doesn't help us. The negation of the antecedent doesn't form part of a valid reasoning sequence, right? If anything, it's that fallacy of denying the antecedent that we've talked about a few times before. It doesn't show up in 5, doesn't show up in 4. Oh, hey, it shows up in 3. And it shows up conveniently as the negation of one of the disjuncts. So we know that's DS, 7 and 3. By the way, it doesn't matter the order that you write in your reference lines. There's a tendency to try to do it numerically, right? So 3, then 7, but it actually doesn't matter. And of course, what that's going to derive for us is that remaining disjunct. And then now we carry through with our, as it turns out, last line. And then now maybe you're taking stock and you're going, oh my gosh, wait a minute. I've never used line 2. How do I know? Not just because I did the proof, but because 2 doesn't show up anywhere in the justifications. That means I never used it. I never referred to it. I never relied on it. But again, it is a little bit of a purposeful red herring to make a point about these little quirks of proofs, like not necessarily having to use every single premise. We didn't see deriving a line twice here, but that's okay. Deriving extra lines that don't help you with the conclusion, that's also okay. There are going to be these little things that also create variations in people's proofs. And again, as long as the line is entered correctly using one of our rules, and the last line is the conclusion, then you have a complete and correct proof. One thing I didn't do in this video is I didn't go through exactly how the rule patterns work or were correct here. For that, make sure you go back to the discussion section recording, or even just various posts within the DBs. Certainly do fill in the blank and partial proofs. Those are excellent for pattern recognition training. And then also, we're actually on this material for the next 3 weeks. We're just getting more and more new rules every week. So certainly ask again if any of the specific rules aren't making sense.